Hi, it's Christy, and welcome back to another episode of Well Intended. Happy New Year. This is episode number 3 now. I am a little bit off of my schedule. I don't know if schedule is the right word, but I had seemed to establish some kind of routine around recording these podcast episodes and writing like a little blog article follow-up thing to talk about, like further musings on topics that came up. I don't think I've fallen off of it completely, but it's been a time of transitions, let's say. I was at my parents', of course, for 2.5 weeks, recorded the second podcast there, and I got a second episode. So that's great. And here I am doing the third. Yeah, I don't know. It feels good, but also feels weird, I think that's what I talked about in the last one, where it just is a bit of a constant combat against your inner critic or what you believe to be your better judgment, etc., which are all imaginary reasons to not do the thing. And of course, now that you've listened to me ramble on for 2 episodes, I am a huge proponent of doing the thing, whatever the thing is, whatever that thing means to you, to just doing it. Obviously, way easier said than done, but if you get there, then I congratulate you, and I congratulate me too, because it is Thursday today. And podcast goes out on Sunday. I have plans for the next 2 days, which take up much of those days. So will this be up on time? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. Certainly my future self will find out, and we'll be there together. I hope if you celebrated the holiday season for whatever holiday you celebrate, there are many. Let's just pick solstice because we love witches. Then I hope you had a good, fun, healing, cozy time. I had a lot of good food, and now I'm back home and sad because now I don't have that food. But my mom gave me some much needed vegetables before I left the house, which is great because I love vegetables. I'm really bad at buying vegetables for myself. So yeah, in the last one, I talked about feeling stuck, and something that I did so much of at my parents' house was take advantage of their Netflix subscription because I of course don't live in the same physical location as them anymore, in the same household, which means that I can no longer share their subscription. So I have not had access to, let's say, freely roam around Netflix and their catalog in a number of years. So I have not had access to that. So that's what I did. But more specifically, I watched so many true crime documentaries. My mom was like, Christy, at the end of this, you're just going to be an expert. And I said, yeah, good. I'm glad because people are putting these narratives together, and these are all examples of what these directors or writers or the people being interviewed, their arguments to convince you of something, which I think is super interesting. I think it was Hank Green. I think he was commenting the other day about a YouTube video essay on the honey scandal, which wild. I think his main takeaway was that you should just watch it so that you can examine the craft of how a video like that comes together, because it's a very good video. And I love that because I don't always find it easy to sit down with a book. I actually often feel like a failure when it comes to reading, longer works that I would probably benefit from examining and looking at the craft of. But I am bad at it. And I think there's a lot of intersectional reasons why I'm not great at it. I won't say bad because that's subjective, but it just is not typically a good way for me to consume writing. That is, of course, also why I love fan fiction so much, is very often it's written in a way that really caters to how fast my brain moves and how much it needs to stay engaged with what's happening. It's written in a really active present tense. There's a lot that's implied or just assumed that the reader knows. I mean, which is kind of safe because if you're writing for a particular fandom, then people who are fans in that fandom will likely be reading it and will have context about a lot of things. But there's a lot of trust in there. And so it just usually takes off at a pretty breakneck pace, which is not a bad thing. Those are things that can kind of guarantee that I will stay focused and engaged and like caught by something. Of course, there are exceptions. Of course, there are exceptions. That's just the way life and the world works. But again, I just feel like I fail at novels or longer works or books even so often. Oh my God, I totally lost my place. Craft. Okay, examining craft. I really only have been thinking about it in these terms recently while I was watching these documentaries and being like, but why am I so into it? Yes, they are frequently portrayals of bad people, bad acts, just the horrible obscenities that humans can do to each other. But I was so enthralled thinking about the mechanics of these documentaries. And there was one that I really enjoyed. It was so fascinating. It's called The Octopus Murders. I think it had a subtitle, and I'm not gonna look that up. I'm just gonna go. So The Octopus Murders is a documentary about, or trying to dig more into the death of a reporter, an investigative reporter, which was speculated that it was not what it appeared to be. It was ruled as a suicide, but there were a lot of inconsistencies. There were doubts from the family, from close friends, and the people he was working with. At the time of his death, he was investigating a large conspiracy, a many-webbed, many-legged conspiracy. Hence the octopus, because I believe there was 8 main arms that he came up with. Okay, the writer's name was Danny Casolaro. That was the reporter who had been investigating. So the director was following his friend, who's also a journalist, Christian Hansen, as they investigated. I thought the way that this was put together was so interesting. It was so fun. It was so cool. So if you do plan to watch this, I am going to say a spoiler right now because I loved it so fucking much. And I think I yelled when it happened. And I don't remember if anyone was home at the time, but my mom is pretty used to me being ridiculous when it comes to TV and people and events that are not actually there and happening in our own home. But there is a moment when they're interviewing one of his oldest friends, who is also a writer and journalist. And there had been, reenactment scenes of Danny in the 90s, typing on a typewriter and using an answering machine and things like that. You never see his face. It's all very moody, soft focus 1990s aesthetic in these sort of cutaway scenes. But Danny's friend was like, it's just really freaky. And she says, I feel really protective of you two because, you're looking into the same things as Danny did when he was, doing this. She says, and it's really weird because Christian looks so much like Danny did when he was younger. And there's a shot of the director and his friend Christian, and they're sitting there, and Christian's got, I think, his glasses up on his head. And it pulls I'm talking like this 'cause it just is so cool. I think about the director or the writer or whoever thinking about this and how to weave it in, and I'm like, they must have felt so good when they thought about putting this idea together, because I would be so fucking happy. I would be so fucking smug about it, to be like, this thing is so cool and I love this so much. There's a moment when they pan or they move to the shot of the director and his friend Christian, the writer. And then it switches to one of the reenactment scenes, the moody 90s aesthetic, and it pulls back and away, and you realize that the person who has been doing all of the reenactment scenes of Danny has been Christian. And it's so good. It comes at a time when you had already been thinking like, God, these guys really look alike. They're really like having these same instincts to look into things. It was so interesting and bizarre and cool and weird and like kind of sad too. But yeah, thinking about the mechanics of that and how moving through the story and the investigation with with Christian as a lens, and then Zach, the director, as a lens at Christian, and then through Christian, Danny. It was so cool. It was so layered and so fun. I think that was also the thing, because as much as it was sad and frankly kind of scary and concerning at times, it was like fun. And it really got me thinking about, the ways in which I was thinking about other documentaries, pulling together a nonfiction narrative. Because when you're thinking about fiction, you're coming up with all of that. You're doing all of the world building, even if those things or those people or those events exist in real life, you are shaping that from the bottom up, let's say. But in nonfiction, I just find that so fascinating that you're trying to pull the story out of the facts, maybe is how we could frame that, or how I could think about it, really. Because how do you do that? And there are so many, and it works to think about both fiction and nonfiction in that way, to know that there are so many paths into a story, but what is the most compelling for you as the author, as the narrator, as the writer? What tells the story you want to tell in the best way? And again, it's that thing of like, is this thing doing what you want it to do? And the importance again of having other people check you, validate you, provide perspective and opinion and whatever else. Because I think you need a wide data set. You need a wider pool of data to pull from about stuff. I don't know. I think I'm losing my own plot. I can't. I really also appreciated and found really fun and compelling the hybrid nature of pulling together all of the sources and material. So like you're editing together, again, a coherent, engaging narrative from archival footage, audio only recordings, written statements, B-roll. I think it's incredible. Like, yeah, successfully, I think weaving together those narratives or those pieces of media is important. When it's done well, it's done well. But when it's done not well, it's really not done well. And then you're out of there. And then you start to think about the fact that everyone featured, from the director to the people who are interviewed to the writers, etc., they're all storytellers. That just got me thinking also about those sources being good storytellers, and also how you would coax those stories from those people, guide those stories and those narratives, because so much is linear and not linear at the same time. And I think the more we tell a story, or the more we tell a narrative to ourselves or other people, the more linear it will become. But there are always so many different parts that are happening at the same time, or they happen a little bit before, but you only talk about it after, and vice versa, which is a very frustrating thing to consider, because time is stupid. The storytelling is just as much, if not more, by the people left behind. So the survivors, investigators, and people seeking answers, not necessarily cops or law enforcement specifically, but just people who are doing investigations. And I've been thinking a lot about that, about podcasts too, because obviously the thing that I resonate with most are the personal aspects of these stories. Like the thing that caught me the most about the octopus murders is Christian's absolute drive to find out about Danny and the really strong parallels between their lives and the way that Christian was being sucked in to Danny's story and Danny's path and Danny's goal to uncover this conspiracy and how he thrived and struggled in it. And then to have the director be his friend, looking at Christian through Zach's lens, literally and figuratively. Wow, I love that. Literally and figuratively was just so intimate. And I think what makes it fun because these people know each other so intimately and can really draw that out. Also, the realization that there are so many writers usually involved in these documentaries, journalists, authors, bloggers, podcasters. I watched one about, I think it was called The Innocent Man, which was based on, oh my God, I'm going to get it wrong. James Patterson's nonfiction book, his only nonfiction book. God, I'm going to Google this later. And if it's not James Patterson, I'm going to be so sorry. Well, I also thought that was so interesting because he's on the board of the Innocence Project, advocated for this case and re-examining to hopefully free a man that he believes is innocent, that a lot of people believe is innocent, and who may have been wrongfully convicted. And then I think the final thing I'll say about documentaries and like using video documentaries to examine and think about my craft and learn things is that I was so caught up in the elements of surreality and absurdity because truth really is stranger than fiction. When you're looking at a fiction story, or when you're trying to, weave together a narrative, like there is a beginning, a middle, and end. And sure, you can have open and ambiguous endings, like that's totally fine. But you at least kind of know as the author or the writer, like where you would kind of want things to go. But life is not a story. You can pull the elements together of a story from life. But that's why I think truth is stranger than fiction. So the opposite of suspending your disbelief, it's almost like expanding your disbelief, contemplating the very complicated nature of people and their motivations. I mean, it's definitely something that I think about all the time is nuance and complexity, but it does make things difficult for some people. And it's not just for the people who are criminally convicted, but really for anybody in these documentaries, like the people who are being interviewed, who are doing the investigations. Why are they doing that? The why is so interesting, certainly more complicated. The last podcast I've been listening to that just finished was The Lords of Death from Tenderfoot TV. Really great true crime podcast. First of all, the host, writer, editor's name is Thrasher. Are you joking? That's incredible. So good. But that one was also deeply personal, and I loved the reveal of this because I did read the description. Okay, here's also spoiler. This guy discovers something about events in his past. But when you first get into the episode and he's interviewing a woman who is his mom, but I was so confused because she was saying, my kids, but she's responding to her son. But then I thought about that as a mechanism of wow, what are the boundaries that you have to think about when you're investigating something that's so closely tied to you? And it's how much do those matter? I think it was a really smart way to introduce that element also of his part in the story. It was super cool. I really, really enjoyed it. Also, the music was incredible. All of the audio choices, really great. I think everything that comes out of Tenderfoot TV that I have heard has had really, really good audio, exceptionally good audio. And they're really creative and thoughtful and intentional about the music that they use and their sound effects, really tasteful. I feel like this is just becoming a little bit of a review episode of the recent media that I've been consuming. But all of it really has been inspiring and really nice to think about and to kind of dissect in why I like something or why I don't like something and what is working particularly in a piece of media. There's been discourse lately about being able to critically review something. And I think I said that in maybe the first episode. Being critical about something does not always mean being negative. Critique and being critical is just looking at something very closely and examining it, trying to take it apart and put it back together to see how it works or doesn't work. I just have been really enjoying consuming other media, and it was nice to kind of turn away and turn to other forms, because I can already feel the itch in me to get back to writing and look at things that I have written semi-recently and see what I can change or what I can adapt and remove and how they can go forward. Speaking of, so last time I was feeling stuck, which I think that's just a kind of permanent feeling, evolves throughout the year, week, day, etc. But I had a really unhinged thought or idea the other day, and I just immediately had to make it happen. And it was to create a new podcast, another podcast. Who am I? And I just wanted to do it. So I did it. Listen, I don't even know if it's going to be up by the time this comes out on Sunday. So it's called Don't Worry, I Bite. The description for it is short horrors to snack on for story time. And I'm starting off with 2 pieces that I wrote for the student anthology that our writing program publishes every year. And I had written 2 pieces I wanted to try and, read them for a podcast, because I don't know, I wanted to do it. And I think and am going to use this as a tool to write more of those pieces, which are kind of spooky, kind of sexy, a little bit mischievous, gory, because I love gore, and gross stuff, horror pieces. Like, I love that stuff. And I think this will be a great excuse and, again, hopefully a motivating factor in writing more of that and thinking about more of that. Of course, always have to think about not making it a slog. So there has to still be something fun about it. And so I think I did so many takes. It was maybe more difficult to land on what I wanted the tone to be. How much should I change a voice? Which I really don't change too much for each character, because I'm not really a voices kind of person. I'm just more of a... I want the vibe. I want the vibe. So I think I'm leaning more into vibe for that one. But yeah, I didn't want it to be too serious. So like semi-serious. So I'm excited. That one I'm also really nervous about, though. It'll necessitate more creation. Like, this podcast is about the act of creation and that kind of thing. So there's much more you can get into that is meta to the actual thing. Okay, recap. What can we take away from this? Lean into examining other pieces of media to think about craft and find your way back to craft, possibly, because I am finding that. And when you feel it, lean into it, because I was also feeling not great about kind of everything. And the transition from being at my parents' house and then coming back to my house, especially after having spent like a week out of those 2.5 weeks, just like with a solid social calendar. So many people. I wore my earplugs so often. Shout out to Loop earplugs. I don't know if I will ever court sponsors, but let me just say, like, as an ADHD little guy with sensory issues, I fucking love my earplugs. They make me function so much better. So yeah, like coming back from such a full social calendar and so much energy and just like things happening was jarring, needed, but jarring. I think I'm feeling okay right now. Like I'm starting to feel that itch to write. So when I got that that idea, like it literally popped into my head and I was like, I gotta make it like right now. Because if I didn't, then I just wouldn't do it. So leaning into the impulsivity of that spark when you get it. Again, I will advocate for using whatever you have close to you or that you will keep close to you, like your phone and a notes app and or a pocket notebook, anything that will help you write something down. Because I just had opened a note that just, the title is new podcast ? And then just don't worry, I bite, and then bullet points. The first one is small horror, atmospheric. And then the second was read aloud story time. That's funny reading atmospheric there, because when I started reading, I was like, fuck, I can't do that because it's too serious. And I was like, I don't know how to do that. If I wanted to do that, it would have to be much more scripted and it would have to be much more, I think, produced and have a different angle or something. But I'm like, I can't do that. I don't think it's in me right now, definitely. But yeah. Okay, so lean in to those creative impulses. Yeah, make time for your creative process and doing the work. So yes, wait for motivation to come. That's fine. But also at the same time, do your best to make practice work for you, whatever that means. And I'm excited to get back into a sort of routine. As someone with ADHD, I both love and loathe routine. They're so good for me and I hate them so fucking much. But that's life, baby. Super glad to be here with you in 2025. I'm looking forward to, hopefully, everybody cross their fingers right now, that an opportunity that I applied for also goes well, but I won't know until at least the end of March, possibly beginning of April, which is far from now, and would be really interesting and I think generative to see and do. So hopefully, that goes well. So wish me luck. I also wish you luck in whatever endeavors you are about to embark upon. We love that. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, whatever time you're listening to this. Thanks for listening. I will catch you next time. Okay, bye.